starting from about this time, 2 years ago, in 2023, we were looking at the release of the Ned's Cozy Fireplace and starting to unpack whatever clues might be hidden there and starting to consider that perhaps there was going to be a new album coming in the next year. And then, of course, Clancy began to be teased more and more as 2024 went on, and the rest is history, right? But just looking back over the past 2 years, they are fully packed with more 21 Pilots related news and events and releases than I think 2 years really have ever been in their history. But more specifically, given that we are now at the end of 2025, I wanted to take a look back at this past year. Everything that happened in 2025 specifically. So starting with the first kind of key event in April and moving forward all the way through now, because even in just this year alone, quite a lot happened. And I've identified and laid out 21 key events that took place in 2025 that are worth taking a look back at and remembering that they exist, because certain ones I either had forgotten about, they kind of had fallen onto the back burner because so much happened this year, or I had forgotten that they even happened in this year. It seems like at least a year ago, if not two, that some of these things took place. And so to remember how much happened, really starting not even in January, but in April of this year until now, how much was packed into it, and how much of a journey they took us on. During the Clancy tour, we got this letter, and there were a series of letters, right, that we saw in the FPE fan premiere exhibits. And this was one of them, a rare letter from the torchbearer himself to Clancy. And this, in a lot of ways, to me, started teasing this idea that something was going to happen this year. Right? We didn't know what. I didn't think there was going to be an album, but something else was going to be coming. The story was starting sort of its final chapter. And this letter in a lot of ways hinted at that, released in April, and talking to Clancy, and also perhaps giving an indication and a clue, or at least seeming to tell the reader that they had won. Now, hindsight is giving us more knowledge than we had at the time, and we know now, in a sense, Clancy did not win at the end of the story. The Banditos lost. But that doesn't negate what's being talked about in this letter, that Clancy still has taken over or taken control of Dema. So let me just read from this letter real quick. Clancy, never forget the cries of your people. Never forget the raw fear that fueled you, or the rebels that made you who you are today. We are all one. We destroyed them so that we didn't become them. We must do better, Clancy. We must do better. So this was the first indication of the ending, not just of the song Raw Fear, obviously, that was more of a retrospective connection, but of this idea that we destroyed them, sort of giving away the ending before it had ended, that they did in fact destroy, presumably, the bishops. They did destroy the bishops so that we didn't become the bishops, but Clancy does become a bishop. And this is where we can't really know for sure what the timeline was that we're working with. Because in a lot of ways, this letter makes sense as something that perhaps the torchbearer wrote to Clancy after he became Nico. Kind of after the events of City Walls, the torchbearer then pens this note to Clancy. But there's also perhaps a much more reasonable interpretation, which is that this is a letter that he writes to the next Clancy, letting him know or reminding him that as he goes through the final attempt with everything that's been set up by that most recent Clancy, the one that we watch, whose story we followed, that we must not become them this time, even though he did last time. But April did not stop there, and we next got the release of the Doubt demo after it went viral on TikTok, just like Dragpath has been. I mean, it was a very exciting time. It was very cool to see the full version, or hear, I suppose, more specifically, the full version of the song, and then they released a vinyl, which of course I was very happy about, but then also just to hear the full version of one of my favorite songs off of Blurryface, and to hear a very sort of different style on it, which I personally like a lot better. So that was very cool. An awesome moment. Not necessarily a brand new song, and it wasn't necessarily super related to the lore, although I think there are some ways you can tie them together. But it was a really cool moment in the spring. Again, while we were sort of completely blind to the fact that the rest of the year was going to unfold the way it did. Then May rolled around, and with it came the Blurryface 10 anniversary. A lot of people, myself included, assumed that there was going to be another anniversary live stream like they did for Vessel. That did not end up being the case. But what we did get was a rollout of Blurryface 10th anniversary kind of posters around different venues where they were touring and so on, and then also a new line of BFX themed merchandise, including a coffee table book reissue of Blurryface, the album on vinyl, and then a bunch of pictures as well, and that was sort of limited edition and sold out quite fast. So that and the Doubt demo vinyl were released alongside each other in May for the 10th anniversary of Blurryface. And then, somewhat controversially, mainly because a lot of people weren't necessarily a fan of the covers that it delivered, but Rocksound put together a tribute album for Blurryface entitled Blurryface Reborn. Remember, there was a lot of hype before this came out, speculation surrounding who might be the artists that were featured. Some of them were, well received, and others not so much. I'm personally not a big fan of this collection of songs. I like the cover of Stressed Out well enough, but it isn't really something I find myself returning to or listening to all that much, unfortunately. But it is a tribute album, and 21 Pilots undeniably did it better and probably would have, not probably. I think 21 Pilots always would have done their own album better than anyone else could. So it was a bit of a challenge to set out to try to do something like this. I think in a lot of ways I appreciate that they wanted to, even if I wasn't necessarily super enthusiastic about the end result. Continuing into May was packed. May was very packed. I remember trying to keep up with all the news at that time, trying to make videos to keep up with all the news at that time in May. It was extremely packed, and we got this letter from Clancy in response to the torchbearer. And unless I'm mistaken, this may be, you can remind me, please do correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think this was the last letter that we got from Clancy. Torchbearer, or TB. The crown is heavy, but I can carry it. The city needs hope, and I alone can give it to them. But the city needs to feel powerful again and snap out of the lifeless obedience they've been trapped in. I can give it to them. I can give them hope. I will be their example of absolute power. I feel alive again. Again, knowing what we know now, this is an interesting letter to read. Because at the time, I thought it was very concerning, and it kind of solidified in my mind, even if I still didn't really want to believe it was true, or accept that this was the case, it sort of fully solidified in my mind the idea that Clancy was, at the end of this, going to become a bishop of Dema himself. And I have at least one. I think I talk about and revisit this letter a number of times, but I have one video just diving into and breaking down this letter and talking about the power and the control that Clancy is tempted by here. So I won't rehash all of that, but I think it's a very interesting letter going into city walls, going into trying to understand intentions and all of that. It is worth remembering this letter exists as we sit here at the end of the year, this letter that came out more than half a year ago, because, well, so much has happened between the release of that and where we are now. It still is very relevant to the ending of the story that we got. And I think bears revisiting, and perhaps it's something that I'll look at again in 2026 in the context of the end of the story that we saw. And then the eye started to close. And of course, many people thought, are they going to go on another hiatus? Because certainly the last time this had happened was right before the hiatus between the Blurryface and Trench eras. There were almost constant daily updates, right? Every 24 hours, I believe, every 12 hours, something like that. Periodically, the eye would close more and more. And then, when it opened, was when we got this announcement. There was, in fact, going to be another album following closely on the heels of Clancy, another album in 2025 entitled Breach, and it was going to be full length. Not an EP, not a collection of singles, not a little deluxe continuation of Clancy. The unexpected, for me, the surprising, almost out of nowhere announcement that Breach was coming. A full-length album was coming. Up until the moment that they posted on Instagram, I will happily admit, I very strongly believed that there would not be a full album in 2025. And then I opened Instagram one afternoon, and there it is. There's their announcement. It was a moment which, again, took place in May, quite a while ago now, but I vividly remember. Not just, oh, it's exciting, they're putting out another album this year, there's going to be more music. That, of course, but it just didn't make sense to me from a marketing perspective. And just from a creative perspective, how they would be able to do that. Then we got the contract. Obviously, that was announced alongside the announcement that Breach would be coming out. We've got a music video for the contract, and it followed directly on the heels of Paladin Strait, brought us right back into the lore, and it had been almost a year since we got a music video, if you think about it. or Allure music video, right? We got the Line and we got the Doubt demo videos, but in terms of Allure video, Paladin Straight in June of 2024 was the last one, and then a whole year later instantly brought us right back to that moment, once again, back to the ending of Paladin Straight. The music video for The Contract plays out, recreating a moment, or a moment that was recreated, depending on how you look at it, in the end of the Clancy tour, and then ending once again on the exact same cliffhanger. But I do think we learned some more interesting and important information from the Contract music video, and it certainly is one of my favorite music videos by 21 Pilots. It was fantastic. Great song, but an even better music video in my estimation. July, we got the Breach tracklist, and this to me was one of the funniest moments of the year. Tyler really sat down, hand wrote the entire track list for Breach, and everyone, not everyone, but a lot of people were just, sitting there watching it going, this isn't real. That's not what the track list is actually going to be. He's lying to us. After, a decade of the story, we no longer could believe anything that he said. I thought it was real. I mean, I never placed a ton of weight on the track lists and so on from the shirts. The track list that had been compiled from song titles, supposedly from the shirts and stuff like that. I didn't see any reason to believe this wasn't real. It included The Contract and so on. I was surprised by a lot of the names of these songs, for sure. And it is interesting looking at this handwritten track list now, knowing what each of the songs sounds like, when I had absolutely no idea then. Certainly had no idea one way it was going to sound the way it did, and so on. We did all think Raw Fear was going to be heavy. I don't know if we thought that at this moment, because we hadn't seen that it was stylized in all caps, because everything here was all caps. But certainly once the track list was revealed on other platforms and things like that, there definitely was some indication that might be the case. I, for one, thought that was going to be the case. Then, moving forward into August, we got the drum show teaser, where they go live, set up equipment, and then end the live stream. And it led to this sort of iconic moment here of, Josh setting up the drums, doing all the work, and Tyler having set up his microphone and gotten his guitar out of the van, just sitting and taking a nice little break. Drum show could have been heavier. Certainly, I anticipated it would be somewhat. I didn't expect Tyler's vocals to be the way that they were, but I suppose that's something that I've kind of come to understand about 21 Pilots, is that you can't really predict what they're going to do in a song. It's part of the appeal, for me at least, is that I had an idea in my mind of what drum show must sound like, given its title, and that was not what it sounded like at all. And then we got another letter, another note from the Dema Org Council, and this was more of a crime report, and I thought this was really interesting. The way they put this together is a crime report related to the events of Heavy Dirty Soul, sort of the moment that started the entire lore. I think it would have been cool if we had gotten some more of these crime reports. Honestly, if they had released like a merch item that was a case file of different investigative summaries that the bishops had done on Clancy as he went through the story, that could have been really cool. Just being able to read through this, the way it's set up, really helps with world building in the story that sometimes feels a little sparse with the Dema narrative. And to have something like this really helps flesh things out and add a real world feel to it, a sort of down to earth moment, just the practical side of what it means for the bishops to be tracking Clancy so carefully and having surveillance voids, the vultures flying around, keeping an eye on him, and writing up reports like this, detailing exactly what's going on from their perspective. I think this was really, really cool to see and help us kind of get a better idea of what things look like from the bishop's side. And then, of course, on the back end of that was this note from Elliot, sort of secret, coded, cryptic note as well. And then, continuing through August, we got this moment, which certainly at the time was a huge deal for a lot of people. I think it's become clear now, especially as they keep announcing everything for 2026, that they're not disappearing. This is not the end of the band. They're not ignoring Europe and so on. They are still doing performances there. But I remember this was a really big deal when this tweet came out. Everyone was talking about it for weeks. I mean, again, it's a significant moment. It brought us into the end of the story and introduced this idea of a hiatus or a break or whatever that is going to mean for the band after Breach, after the festivals in 2026, starting kind of now. This may have been the first time that we saw that Raw Fear was a song whose title was all capitalized. we might have seen it leaked on Spotify before that. I'm not entirely sure, but regardless, this is one of the first times. Then we got Drum Show itself, which again, kind of looking back at this timeline here, we got a teaser for Drum Show the week before, and then over the weekend, we got this. Letters started appearing. We got this from Tyler announcing, like, this is the end. We are going now. Goodbye. And then we got Drum Show, finally. The video hadn't even come out. In between teasing it and the release of the video, this very major thing and this significant and interesting thing dropped. So that's just something to kind of remember about that moment. Even if you remember the tweet was there, you remember the letter from Dema, you remember that they released Drum Show, you remember even that they teased it with that funny live stream. But I, for one, had completely forgotten how the timeline of those events fit together. And that was just a really interesting thing to revisit and remember. And then, of course, as we got closer and closer heading into September, the week leading up to the release of Breach, we got the I Am Torchbearer video, which was unexpected and was really cool to see it. Just really great to get a perspective on the story from the Torchbearer, in addition to Clancy, sort of the flip side of it there. Some people speculated, and I still think this would have been really cool if we had gotten an I Am Nico video. In a sense, we sort of did in City Walls without it being spoken, but almost the ending of City Walls was the I Am Nico video. From when the song ends to the start of Intentions is the I Am Nico video. Videos like this, sort of additional story videos that aren't music videos, but expand upon what you see in the music videos, I think are really cool. Certainly the I'm Clancy one was a significant moment in 2024, and to get a follow-up in 2025 was fantastic. And then, later that week, we got City Walls. We got the ending that so many of us had kind of come to understand was inevitable, but still dreaded and found to be a tragedy nonetheless. The ending in which Clancy became a bishop, took on the mantle of Nico, presumably himself, was the leader of the 9 bishops of Dema. And now we have to, sit and unpack the story with that context in mind, as we even have been doing, looking back at everything that came throughout this year. Alongside the release of the City Walls music video, or more accurately, alongside the release of Breach, they released the City Walls music video. Regardless, in September, we got that album Breach, the most recent album from 21 Pilots, the one which ends the story, which ends the saga that started with Blurryface 10 years prior, from 2015 to 2025. Blurryface to Breach. Fantastic story, fantastic ending. Just a great album all around, and it made all the lead up and the anticipation very much worth it as well. I'm not sure much more needs to be said about this, because it is, after all, the thing we have been talking about for, ever since it came out, and even well before. The day that Breach released, they also released the Breach Digital Remains, which contained the song Drag Path, and that, even more specifically, has been a prominent subject of conversation for the past couple of months, in large part because it's a released song, but only, available in limited form. But just like with the Doubt demo, the sort of unreleased, unofficial track of Drag Path, the audio, has been going viral on TikTok. We've been talking about this, obviously, but for anyone who might be unaware, going really viral. The audio was being shared around a lot. Even the Democratic Party in America was using it in their videos. And then it sparked a controversy, a small one, but an existing one nonetheless, over whether or not the band should release the song, what makes the most sense for them to do, if they should have paywalled it at all, or it should be available for free. So certainly a moment in the band's history that is significant, and so on. The Digital Remains release, and with it Drag Path more specifically, has sparked a lot of conversations in the fall and into the winter. And then, as they got ready to roll out the Breach tour, they announced that there was going to be a Bandito camp, and that was a new sort of element that was added into the tour and the show. Presumably, it's not something that's going to exist when they go on their next tour. I'm not talking about their festivals. We do know that it will be part of some of their festivals, but in terms of the next official tour or for their next album, probably they won't include the Bandito camp, although they might do something similar. They might incorporate it in some other way. But we did get sort of this nice visual teaser, Josh and some of the Banditos, presumably filmed while they were filming City Walls. And I think we got that, we definitely got that teaser before City Walls came out as well. But then with the start of the tour, this was incorporated. We got to see what it was actually like, what it actually entailed. And then obviously the Clancy tour, Breach, the Breach leg of the Clancy tour, was in full swing. It was one of their shortest tours, certainly in many years, let's say. There was a lot more to follow with this tour, not necessarily on the lore side, but somewhat in the technical side because it was not a festival, it was an amphitheater tour. Seemed to run into more tech issues. There was problems with shows being rained out and things like that. But overall, it seemed like it wasn't a tour I got a chance to attend, but it seemed like it was a fantastic show as usual. The Bellwether show in particular, which they debuted downstairs and so on, is a particularly notable performance as well. As the tour went on, someone stole from the fan premiere exhibit the level of concern USB drive, and the band issued this statement, and to the best of my knowledge, there have not been any follow-ups. We do not know any more information. We don't know if this has been returned. If any of you know, let me know, because I would be behind the loop on this, out of the loop, behind the times. But as far as I know, it's gone. It's just disappeared, and it's hard to track down because it's so small. The band even said, we are reaching out to sincerely request its return. No questions asked and anonymity. Fully respected. The level of concern USB drive carries significant meaning for the band and its history. We kindly ask for your help ensuring it finds its way back home. There is a non-zero chance someone did mail it back, and they just haven't updated us because they wouldn't necessarily need to. I would be surprised if they didn't update us. I just think there is a chance they just didn't. But I think it's more likely it has not been returned and has not been found. And it is gone. And then finally, the final part of this that I wanted to look at sort of brings the year to a close, brings us to where we are now, brings us to what we are actively discussing right now, is the announcement of the All Points East Festival in London next year in August. Looking ahead to 2026, this is something that we can anticipate and look forward to. They're headlining a festival. It will include the fan premiere exhibit. It will include the Bandito camp, and it is being teased more than any of their other festival performances. And as I've broken down in numerous videos, there are a number of interesting aspects to this. So that ends the recap. That brings us up to date. It brings us to where we are now. And that was not an exhaustive list. Those were just moments that stuck out to me as kind of the key parts of this past year, the key significant moments. But if you guys are aware of other ones that I missed that you think are important or that really struck you in a particular way or stuck with you, let me know. I'd be curious to hear what those might be.